Okay, so this is the video following up from today's class about modeling the barrel in Maya. So I'm just going to jump straight in. First things first, as always, what do? We make a new project. So go down to File, Project Window, and let's call ours barrel. I found my directory already. Just going into my D drive, my work folder, and then Maya. And click OK. Go back and make sure that we set this project just in case Maya likes to play with us, and we make sure that when we save now we're being sent to the right folder. Scenes in barrel. That's fine. Right, cool. So we're going to start off with an actual cylinder shape because a barrel is overall a cylinder. So again, I'm going to click, hold shift, drag out from the center. I'm going to make it pretty big so it's nice to work with. And as you can see on the side here, we've got these three translate numbers which aren't 0. You can ignore the Y because the Y just means where the center of the barrel is, where this manipulator is. So I'm going to change the X and the Z to 0 just in case they are not 0 already, just to make those nice and equal in the middle of the world. So the first thing we're going to do first is we're actually going to make the barrel height match to what we think a barrel height should be. So I'm going to move it up and I'm going to make it a little bit, move it up. Yep. So in my brain I think that is about the size of an oil drum, a barrel. I just did that by selecting by face, no, selecting by vertex, sorry, not by face. Selecting by vertex, selecting this top group here, and then just moving it up in the y-axis. Remember, W is our translate tool, E is our rotate tool, and R is our scale tool. So now next what we're going to do is we can either go through and select each one of these faces individually, which takes a bit of time, or we can do a quick little trick, as if we click off there. I'm going to look at it from the side a little bit, because if I did this I'm risking selecting more than what I want. So from the side I'm just going to select this top bit here to make sure that I'm selecting both the top and the sides. So we should have the bottom not selected at all. Let me just get rid of the grid. So the bottom shouldn't be selected at all, so I'm just selecting the sides and the very top, and then I'll hold shift and then again just looking from the side just to make sure that we're not selecting any faces we don't want to select. I'm going to hold shift and drag a selection box over the center of our barrel. I'm not going all the way down here, I'm only going across this thin part here. And what that does, it deselects. It reverses the selection so that we should only have the top of the barrel selected. Now first things we're going to do is we're actually going to create the depth of the material here. So a barrel is about, it's made of sheet steel, which is about 0.5, it's about 5 half a centimetre, 5 millimeters in diameter, in thickness. Mix my words up, sorry. Yeah, a barrel is about half a millimetre in thickness of the actual material it's made of. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make that thickness by just making sure we can see the top of the barrel nice and clear. So remember, moving your camera into position. And I'm going to do an extrusion, and then I'm not going to use this tool, remember, I'm going to go to the scale tool just so we have complete control. Scale that in just a little bit. So now we've got this depth here, and that can be thought of as the actual physical metal of our geometry of our barrel. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude again, but this time I'm going to move it downwards like that. Now to make this bit a little bit more easy to see, I'm going to click on the white overlapping squares. That turns on our see-through view, our X-ray view, and I'm just going to move it down a little bit. So if I go to the side view now, or the front view, I'll just turn that back on. What I don't want to do is take it all the way down like this, or take it too close to the bottom. I do want to leave myself a little bit of space, so I'm going to bring it down to about there. So if I bring the rest of the barrel into perspective, here's my top up here, and my bottom is down here. So now with that in place, our general shape is there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually add the ridges to the barrel. And that's easy enough done. So just bring ourselves out of X-ray view. I'm going to go to mesh tools, and then we're going to go down to Insert Edge Loop Tool and just click the options box. There we're going to make sure that multiple edge loops is selected, and then we're going to change the number of edge loops to 6, and then we're going to add one on the side. So remember, when we're adding these, it's best just to be safe to click near the edge, so then we actually add them in the right place. And then in the inside, again, just being a bit careful, click to add in the inside. So we should have 6 exterior loops, and then we should have 6 interior loops, like that. Now, one thing that will happen is, because the bottom of our interior of the barrel isn't as far down as our bottom of the exterior, our edges, because those 6 edges we've just added are added in equal distance between 2 points. So on the outside, the distance they cover is greater than the inside. You can see here that the line that is above here is the interior, and as we go down they get wider apart, because the equal distance between the interior top and bottom is shorter than the equal distance between the top and the bottom of the exterior. That might not make sense as I've just explained it, but a lot of it is just down to how you you keep using the tools and you'll see how they work. But you can see that we're getting these lines appearing here. Right. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make sure that these are nice and equal and parallel to each other. So sticking in this side view or front view, whichever you are, I'm going to go to Vertex. I'm going to drag a selection box over just this top one. So I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to grab the entire one. I'm just going to grab that top group. I'm going to go to my scale tool, and then using the y-axis, which is a green one, or if it's been selected it'll be yellow, I'm going to drag that down, and I'm going to keep dragging down until my manipulator stops moving or it freaks out. So they stop moving now. So all these points here, all these 2 edges, are now parallel to each other. So I'm actually going to go down and I'm going to keep doing that. There are a couple of ways we can do this. So this is one way of doing it, where we actually select what we want to get, what we want to line up, and then just moving it down in an axis until the manipulator stops moving, like this. There you go. The other one is, if we go into edge mode and we double click the interior, so you can see that these are the interior here, because they obviously wrap around the interior. If we just select those and then hold V and then drag down, we're actually then snapping them to the height of the exterior ridges, like that. Both are very usable and both get the same results. That's just 2 ways of doing it. So remember, let's just step back. There's one way where we select both by vertex, we select the inner and outer edges we want to make parallel, and then we scale them in like that. And the other one is, if we go to edge mode, make sure that, obviously you can tell that this is the exterior one because the line travels further to the side than this one, which is the interior one. Make sure we got just select the interior edge, and with translate hold V and then move the y-axis down, and then that should snap like that. Okay, so we've now got 6 parallel splits in both the exterior and the interior of the barrel, like that. Cool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start moving things into place so we can start making the actual ridges. And there's a really quick way of doing that is if we use this group of edges here and this group of edges here. So if you go from the top, it'll be our 2nd split and our 5th split. Those will then become the middle of our ridges. The parts of the ridges actually stick out. So if I go into vertex mode, I'm going to grab the very top split here. Remember that we're grabbing both the interior and the exterior, so we want to make sure that we've got those grabbed by vertex. Just drag a selection box over them. And then the bottom ones here, so we should have these two groups selected. And then using the scale tool, I'm just going to scale them in a little bit, about there. And then I'm going to do the exact same on these two center groups. So I'm going to select both of those, and then I'm going to scale them up like that. So we should have two groups of 3. Okay. And if we've done that correctly, then in the interior we've got 2 groups of 3, and they will be nicely parallel to each other. So at this stage I'm going to save it. So file, save scene as barrel, barrel underscore 01. That's saved, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to turn off the X-ray mode. I'm going to go to edge mode this time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and select the middle loop of these 2 groups we've made. So I'm going to go here, select this center group like that. Remember, if we double click an edge, it's going to select all those edges on that loop. And then I'm going to go hold shift, double click this one, shift double click this one, and shift double click this one. So now, just to show us what we've got, if I just grab the center of the scaling axis, scaling manipulator, if I scale that out now, see we've got this, so we've got both our groups selected, or all 4 of our groups I should say selected. But we don't want this to happen, because obviously if we scale from the center of this scaling manipulator, we're taking all these 3 axes into consideration. We're taking the Y axis, which goes up, taking the X axis, which goes that way, and we're going the Z axis, which goes that way. So by doing that, all the axes have been taken into consideration. In the old days, the way we could combat this is if we hold Control and then drag the Y axis, we're basically telling Maya to ignore the Y axis. You hold Control and you grab any axis, and it will ignore that axis. So here I've grabbed the X axis, so I'm ignoring the X axis by holding Control while I drag. Now Maya, Autodesk has actually added these features in within the manipulator for us these days. So we can see here we've got this green square. There we go. Here we've got this green square. That tells Maya to ignore the green axis. So if I pull this one, it's going to pull all the faces out, all the edges out in the X and the Z axis, but it doesn't take into consideration the Y axis, which is what we want, because we don't want our edges to go up or down. So using this little square, I'm just going to drag it out a little bit till we have that, and we should then have those ridges popping out. Now this barrel is going to be modelled after much more of a realistic barrel, just so we can get the idea of not over moving edges or overdoing things. So this is much more of a realistic barrel. So at that stage we've got most of our modelling done. All we need to do now is just start adding the finer detail stuff, and that will be the 2 lips at the top, the ones on the exterior and ones on the interior, and then the lower lip down here, and we're actually going to add a base rim as well. So instead of having like a proper flat base, we're actually going to have a rim like on a real barrel. So just like we added the edges here on the actual barrel itself, I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and use the same tool, the Multiple Edge Loops tool, but I'm going to set the number here to 1. And then with that set, I'm just going to click on the exterior here to add 1 exterior loop, and then I'm going to click on the interior to add, oh, be careful, so that's a good thing, be careful when you're clicking, because obviously I clicked where it thought I was trying to click a horizontal line, which makes a vertical. So if I click this horizontal line, I'm going to make a vertical split. If I click a vertical line, I make a horizontal split. So in this case, we want to make sure we're clicking a vertical line to split horizontally. So excuse me. So if we click here, we'll make one on the inside. So then we've got these two edges, the interior and the exterior. So with those, so just go select both of those. Remember, double click on one edge to select it, and then shift double click on another and select those. And then I want you to translate that up in the y-axis, so move it up in the y-axis just enough that we go to about there. And then I want to do the same just on the exterior at the bottom, so we don't need to worry about the interior. We just need to add one across here. So going back to my tool, remember, mesh tools, insert edge loop, just make sure that all our settings are the same, and then I'm going to click on the edge to make my edge. Then I'm going to translate that down to there. So now we should have something that looks like this. We should have a split on the outside, a split on the inside, which dictates where our lips are going to be of the rim at the top, and then one at the bottom to dictate where the split, where the rim is at the bottom. So first things first, what we're going to do is go to face mode. And we're going to do the exterior rims first. We're going to go and select one of the exterior faces here of this new thinner grid we've made. Excuse me. And then I'm going to shift, double click next to it, like that. So we should have a ring of faces going around. So this new thin loop here that we've made, click, and then shift double click next to it, selects the group. So we're going to go down to the bottom and hold in shift. So we still want these top ones selected. Hold in shift, click once, and then double click next to it, like that. And then we should have both our top section and our bottom section selected. So now with those selected, I'm going to hit extrude, and then I'm going to go to our scaling tool again. And just like we did when we scaled out the ridges, I'm going to grab the green tool. It's yellow now, but that's because it's been selected. I'm going to grab the green tool and just scale it out a little bit. Oop, there we go. Remember, if you scale to the left, in this case, it's going to come out, and scale to the right, it's going to go the other way. So when you're scaling, just kind of like move your mouse a little bit to get an idea about which way you want to go. So I'm going to move them out to about there, like that. So we should have a top group here and a bottom group here. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the top inner loop here. So I'm going to just select this top inner loop, thin one, do an extrude, and then scale that in a little bit. So this time I have to scale to the right instead of scaling out to the left. So I'm going to scale it in a little bit. There you go. So now if we look at the inside, we've got these faces here, that are the inner rim, and then we've got these faces here. Oops. We've got these faces here, which are the exterior rim. Cool. So we've got one more thing to add down here. Is I'm going to actually go through and select all these. So at this point, we should have an inner ring extruded, and then an outer ring extruded at the top, and an outer ring extruded at the bottom. So just to add one more level of detail to the barrel, so if it does get knocked over, it doesn't just look like a flat plane. We're going to go around and we're going to go select all these faces at the bottom carefully, so that we're not clicking anything behind. So just shift click and select all these. So remember, with them deselected, face mode, click once, and then after this start holding shift, and then just start going around. Yep. Start going around and just selecting all these faces like this. And then I'm just going to go move around and make sure that I've not got anything I shouldn't have selected. Selected. No, we're all good. And then I'm going to, with all selected, I'm going to hit extrusion, and then I'm going to scale that in a little bit. and then I'm just going to move it with this still selected. I'm just going to move it up, so we don't have to do another extrusion. So at this point we only have to do one. Let me do extrusion again. So we do one extrusion, bring it in a little bit, and with it still selected, I'm just going to translate it up a little bit, like that. So now we've got a barrel which has an indented base, ridges protruding from the sides on like one there, one here, and then at the top, and then an interior with ridges corresponding to the outside. So that's how the physical modeling done. We don't have to add any more edges or anything. So if you followed my process to the T, you should have 540 edges. If you've not, it just means you've not added. You've probably not added the bottom bit, which is fine. As long as it's not like 1,000 edges or 20 edges, you're looking to be okay. So something around 540. So at this stage, I want to soften things out. The shape is good, but I think that we've got some right angles going on here where we have the vertical section of the barrel, and then it goes to the lip, and it's just kind of like a 90-degree right angle, and I don't really want that. There's part of me saying that that shouldn't happen. So I'm going to actually go and start softening some of these angles simply by, if I go to edge mode and I grab this bottom edge here, oops, there, and then I move it down just a little bit, you can see there that our right angle is starting to soften out, just like that. And I'm going to do that for the very top one as well. And in fact, with this outer rim, this lower outer rim selected, I'm going to go in and select the inner one as well. So I should have two rim, this rim and this rim selected by edge. With that selected, with those selected, I'm just going to translate them up so that we're softening them angles. And I'm going to do the same for the top edges here, and shift select here. And I'm just going to move them down a little bit. There you go. So now I've got a rolling edge at the top, softer angles here. This will come into play in a minute, and then yes, that should look okay. So that's our actual modelling done. We're not going to change any more of the vertices or anything like that. So at this stage I'm going to save it, save scene as, and that's going to be barrel 2. Because remember, we're doing our incremental saves. We want to make sure that we can go back to a previous save just in case anything does go wrong. So at this stage our barrel looks pretty good. All the geometry's there. But as you can see in the interior here, we're getting some faceted edges. It looks a bit weird, don't look quite nice. And down here you can see that we're getting these faceted edges here. And all in all, it just doesn't look quite so realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the entire object. And I'm going to go up to, remember, hold down right click, go to object mode, select the object so it's green. And I'm going to go to mesh display, drop that down and go to soften edge. Now when I soften edge, all those faceted edges go away, they disappear, and the light starts to move across the surface very, very smoothly. So no sharp edges are ever seen on the surface. So you do lose quite a lot of definition. What we're going to do now is go in and start picking out certain sections to define. So when the light hits it, it makes a very sharp angle and it just picks out certain details. And also we can also leave sections nice and smooth to give the illusion of a curved surface rather than a surface which only has one edge to it. So what I'm going to do with this object selected, I'm going to do the ridges on the outside first. So I'm going to go into edge mode and I'm going to select the middle of these groups of 3. I'm going to select the middle one of each of these, like that. Go to mesh display and then I'm going to go down to harden edge. So when I click harden edge and I move off the object, you can see there that we've actually almost cut the geometry there. We've not actually physically cut it, but we've basically told the light in the scene that when it hits this angle here, that's a sharp light cut. That's a sharp angle of a cut. Same with down there. But you can see just above it and below it, the light still travels like soft, and it gives the illusion of more geometry than there actually is, when really we've only got this one piece of edge flow change in angle. If we turn off it, if we click off it, you can see that it kind of gives the illusion of a smooth transition surface. Same for down here. So going around, I'm going to do that to a few other places. Barrels normally have a very soft rolled edge here at the bottom, so I'm going to leave, I'm not going to cut across this line, I'm going to leave this one, but I am going to do this very bottom one here. So with the very bottom edge selected, I'm going to do the same, mesh display, harden edge, and like that. And you can see there that we've cut a very sharp line. We've told the light to cut across there very sharply. So I'm going to go onto the top, and I'm actually going to add one here across the first edge at the top, like that. So you can see there that we're kind of cutting that edge in here, and it gives the illusion this is a more dense, more complex model than it actually is. So on the inside, we're still looking a bit soft. We've not got much definition in here. So first things first, what I want to do is select in the object. I'm going to select by edge again, and I'm just going to select the bottom ring here. So I'm going to select this guy, go up to mesh display, harden edge, and there you go. So you see that we've defined that right angle at the very bottom of the barrel, and it just makes the surface transition from the sides to the bottom very, very crisp. And one of the last things I'm going to do is just do the same thing to these, just like we did for the outside here. I'm going to do the same thing on the inside with this middle edge here. This middle edge here, and as I move down, I'm going to do the same one to this one, like that. And for argument's sake, I'm going to do the same thing I did here on the interior. So I'm going to look for this bottom. So we're going from this edge up, I'm going to look for this edge here. I'm just going to harden that one as well. So now our barrel looks a lot more defined. We're defining the sharp angles of light on all these ridges. I'm probably do the same for down here. I'll just select this ring here, this one here, and then I'll harden that edge just to do the same there. So now our barrel looks quite defined. Looks a lot higher res than it actually is, and we're going to save this. Save it as 03. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to unwrap the UVs, and the UVs are basically what we lay out so that we can texture on top of this model. So we're going to basically, in a sense, we're not physically going to do this, but in a sense we're going to cut lines, we're going to cut seams inside this geometry and then lay it out flat so that we can then take it into Photoshop and start applying textures. Obviously you can also take this into stuff like Substance Painter or Mari, and this is what happens in the industry, animation, games, TV and film, when we want to texture stuff that might have that might need a bespoke texture. So with that selected, I'm just going to go here, and where all these, so I'm still in the polygon tab, but where at the end here we've got all these options. These are all our ways to project the UVs as well as see the UVs. So the first one I'm going to click is the sixth one along. It should be this little green box with the checkerboard inside. I'm going to click that one, and then it should open this. And this is our UV editor. So I'll just change the colours a little bit. This is where we lay out all our UVs and this is where we make sure that they're all equal and very nice and laid out properly, so we don't get any texture distortions later on. So with this barrel, it's quite easy to texture, to unwrap the UVs I should say, because it's a cylinder and it's a very uniform shape. There's no crazy shapes going on, and up here there is actually a cylindrical unwrap tool, which will make sense in a second, which helps us unwrap this very easily. So the first thing I'm going to do is unwrap the exterior of the barrel. I'm going to do that by going to face mode, and I'm going to go around and actually select all these edges, all these faces, just going up. So I'm going from the front, I'm not selecting anything underneath, I'm just going from this line of faces at the bottom, and I'm making my way up. So I'll do that again, just to make sure everyone understands. I'm clicking one face, and then I'm holding shift, and then double clicking the face next to it. Now with shift still selected, still held down, I'm going to click on another face above it, and then double click the face next to it. So I'm going to do that as I keep going up, and then I will start selecting all the edges of the exterior. And I'm actually going to take this all the way up to just inside the lip. So remember, try not to ignore, or don't forget that you've actually got this lip that underhangs here as well. So remember, we want to include that. So shift, double click, I'm going to start just selecting all these. I'm going to way over the top. And I'm going to end it there. So with all those selected, all them selected, I'm going to go into my UV editor just to open that up so I can see everything like that. Those of you working on a dual screen will find this really easy, because you can just put one on the other screen. I do work on a dual screen, but obviously because I can only record off one screen, I'm just going to keep everything on this screen. So with that selected, and with my UV editor open, remember this is my UV editor window, I'm going to click this button here, this key, this little sort of bent green shape here. This is my cylindrical unwrap, and you can see here something's happened inside the UV editor, but I'm just going to move out of the way and explain what's going on. So what might be a bit difficult to see on my video capture is what Maya's done is start to produce this cylindrical shape with red, green and blue kind of cubes on it. This is basically a projection map. So it wraps a cylinder around any object we choose to be cylindrically unwrapped, and then it'll find a seam to unwrap around and then unwrap from there. So if I go back to my UV editor, you'll see that we've got this big orange shape here. Now to make this a little bit clearer to see, I'm going to hit this blue square with like the yellow square underneath it. I'm going to hit that, and then that should turn blue. This is really good for two reasons. One, it helps us to see what's going on, see what our shape's more clearer, and two, it tells us the normal facing direction. So remember that inside our actual scene, if we see black faces, it means that the normals are facing away from us. We're actually seeing the back of a polygon. The same thing applies here, but where this is blue that is facing us, if we flip it, it'll turn red. So if you do see something that's red, it doesn't mean that anything's gone wrong. It just means that the normals are facing away from us. And most of the time that shouldn't really matter. You should always try and get everything facing you blue. But it isn't the end of the world if you have some red UV shells hanging around. The only time that I'll ever become a problem is if you ever try and put text on these, because if you put text on a red surface, it'll flip it so it'll be backwards. So just be aware of that. I'm just going to flip that back around. So this is now my exterior of the barrel. So you can see these thick orange lines here. They basically show me the edge of my unwrap. So this is at the bottom of my unwrap, and this is the top of my unwrap here. And you can actually navigate round the UV editor more or less the same as you can round the viewport window, except obviously because we're only working on a 2D plane, you can only pan and you can only zoom. You can, holding left click just pans, so we can't tumble around the UV scene because it is a 2D layout. So inside our UV scene we can actually select stuff just like we can inside our 3D view, but we've got a few extra things we can do. So you can select by shell, which selects the entire shape, so it lets us move around. You can select the UVs, which are the actual sort of points of data here. You can select by face, so we select an entire sort of section. You can select by vertex, which basically does the same thing as the UV selection, and we select by edge, which obviously just selects an edge and we can move that around. So you can either because okay, so we're going to move this entire shell now. This whole blue sort of rectangle is called a shell. So you can either go into face mode, and if you double click the entire thing, you're going to get a selection to select the entire thing to move around, or you can select it by shell, and then you can just move the entire thing. So I'm going to move it out of the way just for now, because I don't really need it at the minute, but that's nice and unwrapped for me. So I'm going to go back into my viewport scene now, and I'm going to go and start selecting now the interior of the barrel. So we've got to be a bit more careful here, because obviously from this angle you won't be able to click the ridges that are underneath. So these ridges here, you'll miss them. So just be aware of those being there, and just kind of angle the camera into a position where you can see them. So I'm going to go around, and just like I did at the bottom, I'm going to start selecting all these edges by holding shift, clicking one on the face and double clicking next to it, and just keep going around like that. And I'm going to take mine up to there, because remember I ended my last UV unwrap across this edge here, so I need to unwrap everything after that. So inside my UV editor, just keeping an eye on, I want to click cylindrical unwrap, and then that'll unwrap that. Now remember what I said about red and blues, that just means that the UVs are facing away from us, and I quite like keeping these red for the time being, because then it keeps it very clear about what is what. So I know that the exterior is blue and the interior is red. As soon as you start using more complex shapes, then you can kind of keep a track of what that is just by the shape of it. So the only things we should have left now are these, and these correspond to the base, like the actual flat parts of the barrel, inside and on the outside there. And these are very simple to do, because they're the only things left in the scene, and we're going to unwrap these the exact same way for both of them. So inside the scene, inside my UV editor, I should have two flat planes, two flat circles, and then I've got this thin blue line here. These are all part of the same sort of shape. So I'm just going to drag a selection box over all this, so I've got them all selected. And then I'm going to go to UVs. I'm going to go down to planar. Well, first I'll show you, this is the planar view. This is the planar projector. And what the planar projector does is, again, it might be a bit hard to see. There you go, it might be a bit easy now. You can see I've got this grey square with these coloured squares, coloured cubes on top of it. This is basically projecting across this axis. So in this case, this is the x-axis, so it's projecting across this axis. So if we were looking at it from the side, that's how the camera will see stuff. You'll see it either flat on or facing on. Now that's, once we click that, you can obviously see that that's not the best for us, because we've not got our flat discs, we've only got these like line segments. We don't want that. So I'll just Z that back. So I've got these original pieces together. And I'm going to drop down the UV editor window here, which is, remember we've got modeling selected. On this menu is all the way UV. Drop down, and then I'll open planar option box. And here we've got all our different settings. And the only two I really want to worry about are project from here. And I want to make sure that keep image width height ratio is ticked. Always make sure that that is ticked. So here I know that the best way of projecting these is if I was looking directly down at them. So I'm going to change this project from axis to Y. And you can see there that this square appears and it's actually looking down from the top. You can see there in our UV editor window that both inner base and bottom base are inside this shape, but they just overlap from each other. They're overlapping each other. So I'm just going to select one, doesn't matter which one, and I'm just going to move it out of the way. And as you can see there, we've got, this will be the interior base of the barrel, and this will be the exterior. We obviously know this is the exterior because we've got these extra edges on the side. And for the most part, this is our UV and done. But obviously, what we want to do is we want to make sure it fits inside this grey square here. So I'm going to move this out of the way as well. We're going to make sure that all this fits inside this grey square here. So one way we can do that is by selecting everything and then go to polygons, drop that down, and you've got a load of different options here. But the one we're going to be using is this one called layout. If we just click that, it's going to force everything into the scene, and it's not going to lay everything out because it's not laid everything out as we want it to, because you can see here that two of the faces are really small, and that'll be the interior and the other red base. So I'm going to Z that back. I'm going to option the options, and in fact no, I'm not going to show you how to do that. What I'm going to show you how to do, or what I'm going to advise you do, is just try and by hand try and fit these guys inside this grey square. So I know that this is my front, so I want this to have a good position. I want this to fit nicely inside my texture sheet. So I'm going to keep scaling it down, and I'm going to make sure that this has a really nice position, nice and big, so that it has as much texture data as can possibly fit on it. Put it there, maybe scale up a little bit. You can't let your texture go over this edge. You need to keep it inside this grey square. So I'm going to scale it up a little bit so it's very close to the edges there, and I'm going to move it down. There you go. So one of the rules you need to follow with UV unwrapping is this: if your UV, right, I'll explain that again. One of the rules you need to follow about UV unwrapping is if you've not got any UVs in that area, nothing's going to be rendered there. So if all this area here is wasted space on the texture, this area here is going to be useful because that's where some UV shells live. But for now, all this here is useless. So we need to make sure that when we're laying UVs out, that we're utilising the space as best we can. So I'm going to just scale these down together so they fit in, something like that. And then I'm going to grab the red one, and I'm just going to move it down as well. I'm going to start scaling it in, and I'm going to scale it down until it fits inside this sort of area we've got here. In fact, I'll scale these down a bit more so I can make this a little bit bigger than it is. Like that. Okay. Just moving these to the side so I can get a bit more space of this red shape again. There you go. So all this grey space here, in this case, isn't going to be used. The only space that will actually be textured is where our shapes sit over, like there and there. I've made the exterior bigger because generally in a gameplay scene you're going to see the exterior of a barrel. Very rarely do you see the interior, or if you do, you know, you need to really get your kind of your character's head into a funny position. So I want to dictate, I want to give as much information, as much pixel information to the exterior of my barrel, so I'm making that a little bit bigger than everything else. The bigger something is, obviously the more pixel data can go in it, the finer the detail. You don't want to have stuff too small though, so I shouldn't really have this like that, because the interior of the barrel will then be super pixelated, super low res, and it won't look good. So I'm just going to put this here, and these are same. This will probably be a very low quality texture, a very low res texture, because as we go down the interior of the barrel, the texture will get more and more grimy, and there's less chance of a player seeing that inside of the barrel anyway. So there's less need for this to be a super high res texture. Okay, so with those laid out, I'm going to select them all by face, so they've got everything selected. I'm going to go up to polygons. I'm going to go down to UV snapshot. And here you can see that we've got our file name. This actually gives us, this is why as well we need to set up our projects. So this is going to send our UV template to the image folder inside our barrel project. So we can name this, and I'm just going to name this barrel UV. Barrel UV. And then here in X and Y we can actually change the scale. I remember in class I was talking about using the power of 2, so 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096. These are all the texture sizes you have to use. Okay, so I'm going to change this to, I don't need this to be a super high res texture, so I'm only going to change this to 1024. And that automatically updates. And then I'm going to change I'm going to leave my color as white, and I'm going to, yours might be different here. Yours might say something like Maya IFF in your image format. So I would advise doing a PNG, because when you export this image, it will only, if you have PNG, it will only have the white lines, so that you can drop that into a Photoshop file, and you can immediately put a layer underneath and start texturing. If you did have a black background, then you'd have to go in and get rid of the background, and it'd just be a, you know, it's just adding extra steps to something that could be a lot easier. So I'm going to hit OK. So when I click OK on that, that would have created a new PNG inside my barrel folder and inside my images. Because here I've got a barrel UV. So I'm going to go open this with Photoshop. You can see now that we've got a transparent background with the checker box, and you can kind of just see we've got some markings going on. So if I put a layer underneath and then get a black colour, if I just fill all this, you can see now that all the lines of our UV appear. So now we can texture on top of that, and we can start adding colour and texture and shaders to our barrel to bring it into the gaming world. Cool.